guys so much for being patient and bearing with us. None of the cables play nicely with the Mac, except this one. So, welcome to You're Not a Real Geek, a dissection of the psychology of nerd exclusion and the effects of bullying on and within given different geek subcultures. I'm Jess. I'm going to kind of gloss over some of my intro slides. Just know that I am pretty awesome. And I'm going to skip straight to why I'm here. I love talking about nerd and geek culture. I'm very passionate about advocacy. As somebody working as a female programmer in the games industry, I see a lot of different sort of biased opinions. Oh, can we get cell phones turned down or off, by the way? It's cool. Thank you, guys. Yeah. So I'm super passionate about advocacy. That's like my main focus every time I go to GDC, which is the big game developers conference, and I really want to raise awareness about issues within the culture, especially when it comes to discrimination or bullying or even just being pushy. So what I want to talk about today is the big question. Is the culture of having to prove your nerd cred, are you a real geek, are you a real nerd, has it been taken to the point of bullying? I talked to some folks online about this panel before deciding to put it together, and when we're talking about why people have the need to exclude others and why, as the most bullied culture and set of subcultures, the nerd and geek culture is getting to that point and being so hardcore about not letting anybody in. And here's some of the replies I got. Some of them were like, why would you expect to be accepted by a community? And those of us who are nerds have suffered for our passions, and if you haven't suffered at the hands of the same people that we suffered at, you don't belong either. And to me, this seems pretty ridiculous. I don't know about you guys. So I want to dive into the 4 types of bullying. I want to talk about the geek culture and its recently going mainstream and highlight a few of the problematic subcultures within the geek culture overall, because there's a lot of different sort of categories of nerd and geek, and some of them tend to get a lot more media attention than others, like gaming and programming and things like that. And then we're going to dive into some Psych 101 stuff. We're going to prep for an intellectual, open-minded discussion about bullying and about exclusivity within the culture. And then we're going to actually have one. And it's going to be awesome. So, without further ado, I want to talk about physical bullying, because many people out there only think of this when they think of bullying. You think about the classic nerd being shoved into the locker, wedgies, head shoved down the toilet, and it's mostly talking about either school bullies or younger kids, but it's actually very real and very recent and still pervasive. There was a recent blog post going around a number of different cosplay venues. I found it on Cosplayers Against Bullying, which is a Facebook group that I follow frequently. And there was a girl cosplayer who went to school in cosplay to meet up with some people, and some girl in his class viciously attacked him, pulled apart his wig, scratched him, to the point where he was ready to go to the police and probably should have gone to the police if he hasn't yet. And this was incredibly recent. And it's still happening, and it's disgusting. Everyone thinks of it as a male culture, but obviously this was a female attacking a male. And it doesn't get a lot of attention in the media, which is unfortunate. Most of the time when you hear about bullying, it's little boys being bullied by bigger boys. So I want to keep that in mind. Bullying is not necessarily the way we think about it. Then there's verbal bullying. I want to open with a Will Wheaton video if it works, because I think he hits the nail on the head with the hammer really well here. If I can find the mouse.
When you were a kid, were you called a nerd, and if so, how did you deal with it?
When I was a little boy, I was called a nerd all the time because I didn't like sports. I loved to read. I liked math and science. I thought school was really cool. And it hurt a lot because It's never okay when a person makes fun of you for something like you didn't choose. You know, we don't choose to be nerds. We can't help it that we like these things. And we shouldn't apologize for liking these things. I wish that I could tell you that there is a really easy way to just not care. But the truth is it hurts. But here's the thing that you might be able to understand. As a matter of fact, I'm confident you'll be able to understand this because you asked this question. When a person makes fun of you, when a person is cruel to you, it has nothing to do with you. It's not about what you said. It's not about what you did. It's not about what you love. It's about them feeling bad about themselves. They feel sad. They don't get positive attention from their parents. They don't feel as smart as you. They don't understand the things that you understand. Maybe one of their parents is really pushing them to be a cheerleader or a baseball player or an engineer or something that they just don't want to do. So they take that out on you because they can't go and be mean to the person who's actually hurting them. So when a person is cruel to you like that, I know that this is hard, but honestly, the kind and best reaction is to pity them. And don't let them make you feel bad because you love them. Maybe find out what they love and talk about how they love it. I bet you find out that a person who loves tetherball exactly the same way that you love Dr. Who. But you just love different things. And I will tell you this, it absolutely gets better as you get older. And I know it's really hard when you're in school and you're surrounded by the same 400 people a day that pick on you and make you feel bad about yourself. But there's 50,000 people here this weekend who went through the exact same thing, and we're all doing really well. Don't you ever let a person make you feel bad because you love something they decided is only for nerds. If you're loving a thing, it's for you. Thanks for your question.
I think Will says it really well. Does anyone have any questions about verbal or physical bullying before we move on? Seth.
Have you done it before to somebody else and felt bad about it?
Have I ever verbally or physically bullied someone and felt bad about it? Never intentionally. And that's a very important point, which I'll get to in some of the psychology slides a little bit later on, because bullying doesn't have to be intentional, and it doesn't even have to be something that you realize you're doing for it to happen. So, unless there's anything else, the next couple kinds of bullying are a little bit more difficult for people to understand. They get a little bit different kind of media attention, and they're very closely related, and they're becoming more and more closely related as sort of the internet and online culture evolves. So I want to talk about cyberbullying. It is the newest sort of formal classification of bullying. And it's arguably the most serious because victims are never safe, not even in their own home, bedroom, bathroom behind locked doors, nothing. You can be cyberbullied anywhere, anytime. And what cyberbullying actually is the use of the internet, social media, some sort of online mechanism to taunt, humiliate, and encourage ostracization of an individual. There was a case that got a fair amount of publicity on the internet relatively recently about Megan Myers. There was a mother of a girl who didn't like her, created a fake MySpace profile and pretended to get to know her, like her, and then told her she was a worthless human being, and she ended up killing herself as a result. And formal charges were filed, but nothing ever came of them because it's such a great area and it's so new. Nobody actually knows how to handle cases like this. But it's very real, and there are a lot of online support groups and resources available. And then there's relational bullying. So this used to be much more of a social community thing, and as internet and social media becomes a much bigger part of our lives, this is turning into sort of very closely connected with cyberbullying phenomena. It's hardest to really identify and pick out because it's often done behind people's backs. Culturally, you always hear about people trying to exclude other people without their knowledge, things like that. That is relational bullying. And it's designed to harm someone by encouraging exclusion, damaging reputations, humiliating somebody, and doing it all without them being an active participant. It's much more common among younger females, and it's almost always thought of as more of a mean girls phenomenon. But it does happen with males as well. And what I've got for example of this in modern times was recently a cosplayer asked for a Cherry City Comic-Con refund, and she was name dropped by the event organizer online as being sort of, I don't know if it was a wuss or something, but she wanted a refund because she didn't feel safe cosplaying there. And he name dropped her online, called her out, said, we've got all this stuff and you don't feel safe, you just want a refund or you don't want to go and you're using cosplaying as an excuse, and just bully the crap out of her. But it does happen, it is frequent, and it is often attributed to cyberbullying now. So let's talk about geek culture going more mainstream and being romanticized by the media. There's always been kind of this nerd advocacy in different ways. A lot of the times a teacher will tell you that bullying is wrong in school, don't call somebody a nerd, don't pick on people, tell a teacher if you're bullying, which tends to only encourage bullying as it's happening, historically. There's all of these Bill Gates quotes about be nice to nerds, you'll end up working for one. There's this great Bill Gates versus Michael Jordan example about how nerd wins because Michael Jordan would have to save for something like 500 years to make as much as Bill Gates makes in one day. And then the movie Revenge of the Nerds came out, which was a start, but it sent very, very mixed messages. There's a lot of really sort of, is that actually okay stuff going on in that movie, and it didn't necessarily give nerds the most positive media recognition. That was probably the first time that in mainstream media that nerds were actually the protagonists of a plot. So it's a start. But more recently, we've had some really great stuff going on. There's so much anti-bullying resources available on the internet, and it's available at an increasingly young age as more and more people are connected from their youth. And we've got great pop culture icons like Wil Wheaton actively fighting for a better nerd culture, standing up against bullying and just promoting a positive media message in general. And we've got nerds and hackers becoming prevalent as relatable characters in media, which is a really interesting thing. So we've got TV shows like Leverage and IT Crowd and NCIS and stuff where they've got the typical hacker, geek, computer nerd, but they're actually a character that you like and that you can relate to. And that's something really cool. Nerds were always the creeps and they were always kind of the outcast and the butt of jokes. And now we're actually actively protagonists on shows, which is awesome. And there are also online communities developing so people can connect with other nerds. I don't know if anyone else experienced this growing up, but when I was a kid, I didn't really have anyone in my area that I could relate to. I didn't have anyone to connect with about my interests that weren't makeup and boys and sports, which were all of them. So people are able to make that connection at a much earlier age, which I think is one of the coolest parts about these internet communities. And we get awesome movies now. Some of you might notice that I'm not talking about The Big Bang Theory on either slide. There's a lot of debate around that show as to whether it promotes a positive media message for nerds or not. I choose to interpret that it doesn't, for a variety of reasons. I've got links included to all this stuff at the end of the slides, by the way, and I'm gonna share my email at the end, so if anyone wants to see them or read up on them or read over the slides, I've got tons of material for you guys. So, now that we're getting all this mainstream media attention, everyone wants to be a nerd, right? We're the cool kids. Geek is chic. Geek is sexy. Except, not always. So, there's a lot of backlash to the word nerd. It's either a mainstream sort of hipster-esque word, or it's still an insult in some cases. It sends a very mixed message. And what we're doing with the evolution of this culture is we're seeing more and more people sort of reject the title and say, oh, if you're labeling yourself a nerd, you're not actually a nerd. You're not really a geek because you didn't like it before it was cool, or you weren't bullied for liking it. And it's not new behavior. This happened all the time in high school with like indie music and rock bands where people hated the band once it became popular and mainstream. Like, people want to like things that nobody else likes because they get a sense of identity and they feel like they're special from it. But do you really have to be bullied or picked on or alone to be special? So let's talk about a few of the subcultures that are getting more and more attention from the media. There's the programmers and the hackers. The perception of a hacker is almost always a white male, usually in his early 20s or 30s. I had a great post on my newsfeed, actually. There is this story that's been going around for a long time, said there's like the wife's diary and the husband's diary, and the wife's diary is like, oh, I think I'm losing him, he's so distant. I tried taking him to dinner, he didn't want to talk about anything, all this stuff. And the husband's diary is like, I can't figure out why my code doesn't work. And it gets a lot of laughs, and you know, when I first saw it, I was like, huh. And then somebody posted, can somebody tell why the husband's the engineer and the wife is the one obsessing about every detail of their lives together? And it got me thinking. Most of the industry is younger white males. As somebody who's fought to get into the industry, I can say that the games industry is especially representative of that image. It's getting more and more diverse in terms of gender and culture, but it's only because I think the industry is actively trying to embrace advocacy, whereas it never was before. You see people asking, why is the husband the engineer? Why is everybody in this example white? And it raises a lot of interesting questions, because that is every single media representation of a hacker. I mean, you get shows like Leverage where Hardison is a black male, and you get the occasional show like NCIS where Abby is a white female. But those are the exceptions and not the rules. You look at any nerd movie and they're all white males. And I'm really hoping that people who want to break into the culture stop feeling intimidated by this. And I think a lot of the ways the culture is moving now are actually contributing to that kind of isolation. There's an emergence of a programmer culture in the programming world, where everyone has to work 80-hour weeks, they work hard, play hard, they've got startup excuses. A lot of it's, you know, localized to Silicon Valley. A lot of bigger companies don't tend to have as much of this problem. But you essentially see this young frat boy type and other engineers that have fit into the more historical definition of geek and nerd feel very isolated by this culture. And it's very easy for it to get to the level of bullying. I had a professional disagreement with someone and ended up getting yelled at on the floor and called names in front of my team. And it's not a unique experience for a lot of people that don't tend to fit into this classic definition of either a nerd programmer or a programmer. Gamers are also getting a lot of media attention. Who here has seen this picture before? Yeah, that's what I thought. Did you know that she actually took that picture as a joke? And now she is the poster child for the fake gamer girl? How messed up is that? Like, obviously you don't buy controllers. Nobody ever thinks about how did she get the controller in the first place, right? Like, obviously there's something going on. So gamers have a very, very unique subculture, and they're probably one of the most affected by this mainstream media attention. As gaming gets more and more popular, it becomes an affordable alternative to going to the movies all the time. I mean, you drop 50 bucks on a game and you get a couple hundred hours of gameplay optimistically, or at least, 40-ish, depending on the game. And if you go to a movie, you get like 2 hours of entertainment for a quarter of the price. There's no comparison. And especially with like Netflix and things out there, it's definitely the clear winner in terms of entertainment media. And we get an influx of more and more people, especially given the games that have been coming out that have really gone mainstream, like Call of Duty, GTA, all these sports games. And the mobile and social industry has made gaming accessible to everyone. So everybody's a gamer now. And guess what? Gamers don't really like that. Especially the ones that really hold tight to their identities as gamers. And they are some of the worst in terms of verbal bullying that I have ever seen happen. Most of the gamers I play with bash on each other all the time. It's a part of being there and playing with us. If you're new and you can't take it, it's not our problem. That's their interpretation of gamer culture. And there's so much more out there. And who here has seen this picture? Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about my experience in the industry, which I know I've been doing a little bit, but it's taught me many things about how women and men approach things differently. So the types of bullying we're exposed to at a very early age are oftentimes different than what men experience. People think about being bullied as a young boy or a man in terms of physical and verbal abuse. Whereas with girls, you see a lot of relational and a lot of verbal abuse. Girls are taught early on, I'm going to be humiliated and ostracized by my peers, excluded from this group if I do anything wrong, because that's what happens growing up. Not as much to men. You get, beat up. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen to men, but I'm saying that societally and culturally, as a woman growing up, you are taught to fear those types of situations. And these conditions sort of make women shy away from situations where they feel like they're being set up to fail or set up to be humiliated. I still feel that fear sometimes when people start asking me about my interests. And I've had to teach myself, okay, no, people just want to talk, people aren't gonna ostracize me because I don't know everything about some little thing, and yeah, it happens, there are jerks out there. But when you see women going to conventions and being chewed out for not knowing everything about everything and being questioned in terms of their ability to be there, it tends to isolate them from wanting to be a part of that culture anymore. It's overwhelming, and the anti-fake geek girl or fake nerd or fake gamer is everywhere. And yet every guy that I talk to really wants more geek girls. Everybody wants more geek girls, and yet. So this has to be something that culturally shifts. We have to open it up so that everyone feels like they're welcome to the culture if we expect to get more diverse members of this culture. Does anyone want to talk about any of the subcultures I mentioned before we move on? We're really close to the open discussion. Yeah.
How do you feel about the exploitation ones, like a lot of for-profit play games with pretty girls, groups popped up when this kind of started up, which did not help?
Okay, so I have tons of opinions about that, and they're all that I'm completely disgusted. There was a website that cropped up recently that was advertised to me on Facebook about learning to program via beautiful ladies. Oh my God. Coder chicks or something like that. Code chicks. Code ladies, code babes, codebabes.com, don't go to it, don't give them any traffic. But somebody posted a link on my Facebook feed, a friend that I had met at a con somewhere, and I commented, I'm like, this is, so I was not the first person to comment, and someone was like, oh man, my intelligence level isn't the only thing that's going up. At which point I drag-agged and I posted this big rant about how disgusted I was and how if you want more female programmers and more nerds in the industry, this is not the way to go about it. This is the way to alienate everybody forever. End of story. And surprisingly, there wasn't much argument. Everyone just kind of shut up because there was a woman in the industry talking about it. But had I not been there, who knows how crazy that thread would have gotten. I mean, it was already a couple comments in. I get that there are a lot of jokes to be made about it, but it's really disgusting to me.
So sometimes when I'm just on the unit, I see these cattle ads. They're really weird. They say,
I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you. Do you mind coming up to the mic? Sorry, I didn't mean to make you walk all that way. Just, you're in the back, I can't hear.
Okay. So sometimes when I've been on the internet, like Facebook or something, trying to looking for a show, I see this panel ad on the side of the screen that says, no girls allowed, wife won't be seeing much of you after you click here. How do you get those to go away? They're really annoying.
They are really annoying. Ad blocker is a good way. I think Facebook, they either used to have it or they recently had a feature where you could specifically hide an ad and say that I'm not interested in this content. So I think
how do you get them to go away the social phenomenon?
That is a much more difficult question. Yeah. So I know a little bit about how that business works. What you do is you pay a certain amount of money and they promise you a certain amount of clicks. And what Facebook does is it takes your demographics and it searches out people that are likely to click on those ads based on your hobbies listed and things like that. And companies aren't going to stop doing that until it's not profitable. So until people stop caring and stop actually giving them business, it's not going to stop, unfortunately.
You're helping, don't give them money.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing you can do is honestly hide the ads, tell Facebook, I don't want to see that.
Yeah, maybe on Facebook is like when I look for anime show.
Right, yeah.
They're everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, they get paid per impression, so people seeing the ad, and they also get paid a much bigger premium per click. So if you're using ad block, they're not getting your impression.
Okay.
So that is a bonus to ad block. Cool. So apologies if you've taken Psych 101. This might be a review for you. But there was a really cool old dead guy named Maslow. And he came up with this hierarchy of our needs as human beings. And at the bottom, at the base of the pyramids, are our physiological needs, you know, what the cavemen survived on: health, food, sleep, shelter, water, you know, the very basics in order to survive. And then there is safety, being away from danger, you know, being away from the elements, your ability to, you know, sleep at night because you don't think you're going to get attacked. And right above that is belonging. Love, affection, being a part of groups. And belonging is, unless we're talking about physical bullying, which obviously affects safety at one rung lower, belonging is where the bulk of bullying hits people. And it is the basis for things like self-esteem, feeling comfortable in groups, being able to socially interact, and actually achieving individual potential. There were many studies done on social rejection and how it affects our development as human beings. Some of the most interesting studies, one that's not listed here because I couldn't find the actual study, was about how they took babies away from their mothers at early ages, and the mothers ignored them and didn't, you know, give them any sort of feedback as babies, and they all were showing very terrible signs at an early age. They quickly put an end to the study, and I don't think a formal paper was ever published other than why they discontinued the study. But there was a full study done on rhesus monkeys by Harry Harlow on the same type of maternal deprivation, which again I have a link to at the end of the slides. If you email me for them, I will give it to you. And
the study where they had the stuffed animal, the carpet, and the other one, like a metal doll for months long. They fed the monkey babies with like a metal monkey thing, and then one was like plush and comfortable. And they compared it.
This study, I think that study was done by the same guy, and I think he did multiple studies on this group of rhesus monkeys, but what he had was he had a special breeding setup for these rhesus monkeys, and as soon as they were able to survive without their mothers, they were isolated and put alone, whereas the control group got to stay with their family and their colony. And the monkeys that had that maternal deprivation had much more sociopathic tendencies towards other monkeys when they were finally introduced later on, and they were also unable to acclimate and become a part of the group. There was also a cool study by Kip Williams comparing the way people recall pain, and particularly the way people recall physical pain versus social pain. And almost universally, even among men versus women, social pain was worse. People rated the pain of being ostracized from a group, being humiliated, about 4 points on their scale, which I think was either out of 100 or something like that, something standardized. I've got a link to the study. 4 points worse than physical pain, which is huge. If you think about all of the moments in your youth where you felt hurt, how many times do you think about a humiliating situation? For me, it's almost every time, and I've broken bones, I've dislocated my knee. I guess now when I think about it, like I've recently had knee surgery, so that's what I think about. But if I think about before that, like before anything recent, it's all humiliating situations. And another important point for all of these studies' basis is that the experience of social rejection, isolation, bullying are all perceived and therefore exist even when the bully doesn't intend it or doesn't know about it. So when I said I've never intentionally bullied anyone, I'm being honest, but I'm not about to say that I've never bullied anyone, because I don't know. I hope I've never bullied anyone. I try to be as an accepting and inclusive person as I can, but that's not to say it hasn't happened. So now I'm going to open up the floor. I want to have a good discussion about nerd-on-nerd bullying, bullying by outside groups. I want to highlight that there is sort of proven abuse cycles, and I feel like bullying relates very closely to them. If you think about dad hitting mom, mom smacks the kid around, kid's going to take it out on the only member of the family that can't fight back, the dog. The geek bullying cycle is happening sort of the same way. We're being bullied by mainstream people. Different geek subcultures are going to pick on other geek subcultures to feel better about themselves, or just exclude new people entirely. And I've heard a lot from people who have been excluded multiple times based on different criteria, like loving mainstream things also, so you have too much social capital to be a nerd, so you're not cool, you're not welcome here. People considered to be too attractive or too athletic. Basically anyone holding social capital is now being rejected by the majority of geek subcultures because we're too hipster for that. It wasn't cool if you were not bullied for it. And this isn't universal, but it does happen and people have reported it. So when we're talking, keep in mind that this is a safe place. Bullying is not always intentional. And Does anyone want to talk about anything?
You want me to go to the mic?
Sure.
So I'd like to say that I was one of the girls who was a gamer girl from a very young age, and I had male friends who would let me come play their games with them, but then wouldn't acknowledge me at school. Our relationship had to be kept secret. And while I've grown older, some of that has faded away. However, I've even lost nerd cred with my gamer boyfriend and programmer boyfriend because I haven't read the Narnia books and I haven't read Lord of the Rings yet. And so he bought them for me for Christmas and is going to read them to me. But it still feels very insulting because I shouldn't have to worry about losing nerd cred with my boyfriend.
Absolutely. That's not shocking, but it is saddening. I feel like it relates a lot to the different types of bullying that we're exposed to at a young age. I feel like relational bullying is less prevalent in male demographics, and he may not understand that this is actually a form of bullying.
And then the other thing I wanted to bring up is you had mentioned females in the programmer profession, and that another thing he does is he is always saying, well, you should become a programmer. Why do you want to become a teacher? I mean, you'd make a great project lead. And he's constantly badgering me to try and become a programmer because I understand that he wants there to be more female programmers and thinks that I would be a great person for that. But you have to be cautious. So I guess I wanted to bring up the unintentional bullying and to really watch what you say because you can easily hurt somebody without intending to.
I think that's a really good point.
And dude, you're not missing much with the Narnia books because they are poisonously misogynistic Christian propaganda, so.
Thank you.
Lord of the Rings is fun.
Lord of the Rings is fun. It's super long there.
So in high school, I was sort of a victim of like the exclusion, the verbal bullying, so much that I was recently diagnosed with PTSD because of just the amount of bullying that I had. And my parents, mostly my mother's solution to this is just to act more normal and like more mainstream things. Stop blogging about so much nerdy things. Or blog cute hipster pictures like everyone else instead of all those games and movies that you like. And how do I approach my parents about this? Because yes, technically I would be bullied and thought better of, I guess, but I don't feel like myself. So how do I approach this?
Honestly, that's a really tough one because they are your parents and they just want to see what's best for you, and their definition of what's best for you is for going back to Maslow. They want your safety and your mental health more than anything, and they care about that more than things higher up on the pyramid.
Right.
But I think that you're old enough to have a mature discussion with them, talking about how you understand what's going on and how, like, show them the Will Wheaton video. Show them that the best response is to pity the bullies and that nobody should ever make you feel bad for loving the things that you love.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about the fake geek alarm, I think something that struck me by this is it's probably people trying to, these people will, have sort of like a traumatic experience. So they're trying to make sure they don't include the people who were bullying them in their crowd. So it's like it's a defense mechanism, not so much, they're trying to exclude people, it's trying to make sure, again, if you look at the lower levels of the pyramid, it's trying to ensure their own physical safety.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents on this. Yeah.
So my response to that would be that we've all grown up a lot since we were bullied like that, hopefully.
No.
No?
A lot of it just sort of stays.
I understand that a lot of it stays with you, but as you experience these things, you grow and you become a stronger person because you endure hardship for the things that you love and the things that you believe in. And while I'm not saying that we all have to be the bigger person here, I am saying that as things become more and more mainstream and as people get exposed to new things, it's possible that maybe they grow up a little bit as a result. They have their horizons expanded as a result of seeing all these new cultures, and they feel bad because the thing that they now hated on is cool.
Oh, so you're saying that, yeah.
I'm saying that they may have grown up even if we haven't moved past it.
I'm not saying that people haven't moved past it. I'm saying that, you know, the concern is that the people who were bullying them in the past haven't moved past bullying them still because they're just, yeah.
I think that that's a valid concern, and I think that if somebody has bullied you in the past, accepting them without them showing them that you've changed may not be something that you consider safe to do, and I would not encourage anyone to do anything that makes them feel unsafe, ever. But if somebody hasn't personally bullied you or someone you know, maybe it's not fair to exclude them because they don't have, or they have too much social capital in the mainstream world.
I'm not justifying it, I'm just trying to explain it.
Oh, absolutely, and I completely understand and respect that perspective. Like I said, nobody should ever do anything that makes them feel unsafe.
I don't do that. I'm just trying to explain what I think would be what's going on.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for coming and participating. This is an incredible turnout. I think nerd culture is headed in a very exciting direction if people keep caring and keep wanting to learn about this.